Hey everyone! Welcome back to the third episode of Remarkable Rare. Today we will be discussing the caregiver perspective and learn about how being caregivers of Shprintzen-Goldberg syndrome, also known as SGS, has impacted their lives. So I'm Kayla.
And I'm Zohan.
And if you're new here, we're students at the University of Notre Dame who are interested in learning more about SGS and raising awareness for the rare disease community. So once again, we are joined by Melissa, and we are also joined by Tim today. They're both caregivers and parents of Hope, who has Shprintzen-Goldberg syndrome.
And to start it off, once again, SGS is a very ultra rare disease that impacts less than around 50 people in literature. And as such, the care for these patients is very extreme and really takes a lot out of people. And this is especially true for, the primary caregivers, in this case, Melissa and Tim. So we're really interested in exploring, how their lives have changed since the diagnosis and, how they take care of themselves and any advice they would have to other people. Let's just start with Melissa and Tim's perspective on how this disease has impacted them.
From the beginning of her birth, it very much affected the other kids because, my attention was full keeping Hope alive, especially the first year. And so it was very difficult. A lot of things with Hope took more than one person doing. And so a lot of the kids, had to learn to be assistants very quick. As a parent, I think what's the hardest thing is when one child requires so much attention, that you're missing and neglecting other things. And so I think with the older kids, they had really had to grow up just really being patient, because a lot of their needs had to be put on hold, because like most of Hope's were like literally life or death. There's a lot of sleep deprivation, and then your job is like never done. Yeah. And so no matter, the stages are different, and some are easier and some are harder, but the care, is full time, and it will be lifetime. And then when you learn later on, as they're growing, like things just aren't going to be typical in just about every area of life. And so you have things that's easy about that. And then you have things that that just, sadden you, and you have to you just have to reconcile that, you just want your child to live the best life that they can live, but that is going to look very different.
Well, it was just basically from day one, and she was life flighted after she was born. And, having four healthy children and then having our youngest Hope with the rare disease, it became our life. Our family really had to kind of adapt to just helping Hope. And we all thankfully started working as a team, and it drew our family closer together, even though it was a lot of work and it was hard and sometimes frustrating. But we've all kind of had to sacrifice over the years, certain things maybe we would have wanted to do or the kids wanted to do, but just because, because of Hope and some of those medical things or challenges or surgeries, we couldn't do some things. But ultimately we've just had to learn to work together. And I think in a way it really brought our family closer, actually.
Wow. So, yeah, I really think their story is incredible. And they're both like incredibly resilient and they put so much work into caring for Hope.
Yeah, I agreed. I feel like, there's so much that goes into being a parent already, and then adding on top of just being a caregiver for a rare disease that complex. It just really does make the job of parenting and caregiving a lot more deeper. So kudos to Tim and Melissa for just all that they do, and for other caregivers as well, because it doesn't sound easy at all.
Yeah, sure. I really thought, they're like pretty much 24/7 care on Hope, and it's like pretty complex procedures. It's like the G-tube feeds, braces popping off, stuff like that. Like it's just, you would expect that of medical professionals, but not,
Exactly.
people outside of the medical profession.
Yeah, and like even just doing some research, it really does always boil down to parents being the expert at times, because they're the ones who really are 24/7 caregivers and see everything. And then even as I mentioned, it really does take a whole team, siblings too. So, well, yeah, just knowing that, there definitely are like triumphs and challenges. Let's hear what, Melissa, you have to say about just what that's like for you.
On the triumph end, I think having living with anyone that has like ongoing critical medical care issues, you really see the small victories that other people don't see. Um, and you really celebrate those. There's because you're always really going through something. But when there is growth and there is healing and there's strength that happens in different areas, it's amazing because like sometimes it seems like progress is very slow and things are kind of ongoing. But then when something happens and you realize, oh, we're not even dealing with that anymore, and we've been dealing with that, for years. I think that yeah, like you celebrate victories um, much differently and triumphantly because a lot of them are critical life-saving things. And so it really changes your perspective on like really the importance of what's important and what's really not. With going through what we have for, the past 13 years with Hope, it's just really grown me as an individual so much more in just loving, caring, compassion. I knew nothing about anything medical. My degree's in social work, and at least I was a good researcher, and so I've learned that I have to research everything, and you look at challenges much differently. Um, yeah, and then you just try to sort through, and I think it teaches you your limitations as well. There's things that I try my best to do, and sometimes your 100% best just isn't enough. And then you have to just trust that as you've done everything you can, and I think that's where I talked about before, just where my faith comes in, because, once you've done everything and doctors aren't knowing what to do, you just still have to trust and have faith that, God has control of it. And it's amazing then to see also what happens with that too, when you're at your end, where God steps in. And I think as a caregiver, there's just huge challenges in when you're constantly dealing with having to do medical things that your child doesn't want to do but they cognitively also don't understand why they're having to go through what they're having to go through. You're always troubleshooting and always trying to figure out a creative angle to make things happen that that needs to happen. I confess I bribe a lot, but she's had different surgeries and procedures where there's aftercare too, that when we have to do things and we just actually set up a train of like presents for her to open. It's like as we're, when we get through with this, there's a gift. And that's hard too, because yeah, like, a lot of her things are attached to really difficult things that she's had to go through, but it's really helped, and it helps bring joy into difficult situations.
Thanks so much for sharing, Melissa. I think it's so important to be able to just be able to see the small moments and celebrate those with each other, and see that as a way to just motivate, each other and be able to get through these things with a smile on your face. So.
Yeah, I thought the story was really funny when you said that you were a bribing parent. I thought, that was a great way to make like a dark moment into something that's like happy and memorable for Hope. And like that really improves like the entire emotional state of your family. So I thought, that was a great idea, and you shouldn't like beat yourself up over it. 'Cause I think that's the best you can do.
No, I agree completely, and when you're that young, like, it really does sometimes take, a more like a toy, a physical reward, something that, as adults, we might not buy into, but so important to know, like, at different stages in your life, what might work best for your situation and your family.
Yeah. Well, without further ado, we would also like to go on to the next question, which is what advice would you have for other parents, either diagnosed with SGS or other rare diseases?
You have to be the one who advocates as a parent for your kid, because a lot of times the doctors just don't know. They see so many kids. Sometimes they just think you're just being overly concerned parent, and your kid's fine when it's really an issue. And so you follow that parental instinct that if you know your kid well enough, and there's something wrong and not seems right, then just keep following, keep knocking, keep asking, keep going after the doctors, because that's what saves the kids' lives. A lot of times is the parent really
Mhm.
being the advocate for the child.
Yeah, I think it's really indispensable for people that are first diagnosed and they're first starting on the rare disease journey to really know, like, if a doctor isn't really on board listening to you and willing to think outside the box, that you really need to find a different specialist in that category because, if they're not going to listen to you, it can be very harmful. Yeah, if you're not making a good connection and they're not listening to you, you need to find somebody that will, because you've got to be a good advocate. I think the biggest thing with caregiving is advocacy. Like you really have a drive to not stop because you are on phone conversations, doing appointments, having to troubleshoot, being sent to different specialists. And, you have to be able to communicate for them because they can't advocate for themselves. And so I think that's, above all, like, I mean, there's daily caregiving that is ongoing, but you have to be a huge advocate and it gets really weary at times doing that, but you can't give up because when you do, it could be very detrimental. And so when something's a matter or something's not going right, you just have to keep going until, someone will listen and someone will do the tests and figure out, you know, what's going on. At the beginning, I think everything is very scary. You get a diagnosis, of your child or your loved one, and it's all very, very overwhelming. But to just take one day at a time, find a network of a support group that you can really connect with and get good information from. Because I feel like the more information you have on whatever you're dealing with, the better equipped you are to deal with it. And so become a really good researcher, and then learn to take notes of things that you're seeing. Because sometimes you get into an appointment and or a situation and you kind of forget a lot of things that you needed to bring up. And so just doing a lot of almost like mini journaling of, different things that you are seeing and witnessing happening, because, that can help doctors also connect dots if they're seeing different things that, may be causing things. So, and then realize too that everything's in seasons. Like you might be really struggling with one thing and having to really work through it. But another season's coming. Like things are always in seasons. Like there's good days and bad days. And I think that when you're dealing with very medically complex children and things that are very rare, you get to see the lowest of days, but then you also get to see the victories and to celebrate those victories. Like, no matter how small they are, when you're making progress is just huge, no matter what it looks like, and it might look very differently. And then also just to have grace for yourself. Like, I think a lot of caregivers, like, just feel like they're failing in so many areas because they're doing so much, all the time, every day. And sometimes you just never feel like you're doing enough, but you're doing all that you can and more. And so to just really have grace for yourself.
Thanks, Melissa and Tim. I really thought that your point on advocating for hope at all times and never giving up advocacy even if the doctors believe you're wrong or you're crazy. I think that's key, especially in these cases, because the doctors often don't know more than you, and as a caregiver, you really know the most out of anyone. And if you don't advocate for them, no one will. So, yeah.
Right, and you make a good point, both Melissa and Tim, just about, sometimes like the doctors may think that you're an overly concerned parent. And in some cases, it definitely could feel that way, and it is that way. But especially with rare disease, it's so important to like be able to distinguish that, um, and especially with like the caregiver aspect of being the expert. Doctors, they're experts in their field, but with how ultra rare diseases are, it does require just like a team of perspectives, and that includes both caregiver and physician. So.
Yeah, I also thought that your point about, taking it one day at a time, that's like really good advice, even for just like other people, maybe not living with rare disease, but just having a difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think a lot of the time we think too much about, a week from now, a month from now, like maybe a decade from now. And instead, we should really just focus on getting through like what's happening right now and doing it day by day.
No, such a good point, Alan, and especially like when you think too much ahead of things, it all it does is cause worry, and so especially with rare disease, you know, tomorrow's a mystery, and so it really is important to just be able to take one day at a time, appreciate and celebrate the small things, one day at a time. So really great advice. Um,
Yeah. So going on, even when you're living with SGS or many other rare diseases, it's still really important to think about caring for yourself, the caregiver, because if the caregiver never gets their needs met, then they can't like provide the quality and just quantity of care that the patient needs, and like that's just really bad. So I would like to ask you and Tim, what are strategies or things that you do to care for yourselves?
Self-care is kind of a hard thing. So, yeah, that's something that's like on the to-do list that doesn't really get done. So, yeah, it's you just have seasons. There's a lot of sleeplessness. I think one thing that's been a huge beneficial thing is Hope gets respite hours.
Mhm.
So we have a girl who's a Bethel student who
Uh-huh.
comes in, and that's been really helpful because Hope just loves it. A lot of the things, are just are difficult, and I think all of the family takes a toll and gets drained, and so it's nice that
Mhm.
somebody else can come in and help once in a while.
Well, thanks again, Melissa and Tim. I really did think that it's incredible that you still get some self care. I I do think it's like pretty sad that you're sleepless all the time, but yeah, I guess with such a disease, it's kind of inevitable.
Yeah, um, you know, I think it's so important to be able to, find ways to adapt in the moment of things. And I think with what you said, it just shows the realities of how your form of self care it might not be a traditional way, but it's so important that you're still recognizing the need for it and trying your best to fill it. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I also thought it's interesting, like how much the respite hours help, and just like how important it is for other people to step in and try to give support to families with rare disease, since like maybe to other people a couple hours isn't such a big deal,
Exactly.
but for you guys having a couple extra free hours that just like makes a huge difference.
I agree completely, and just burnout is so real at any stage in life. So it's so important to not only act in the moment of things, but also be proactive in preventing it from getting to the point of just feeling super burnt out. So
Mm.
self care, like spread throughout, your day and stuff, is just so important.
I guess before the next question, I would just like to ask you, Kayla, like what are some self-care measures you would do, whether like in the case of doing a rare disease or just in general?
Yeah. So I think one thing is just so important is just to be able to have a time to just really journal or do something that just allows you to really get your thoughts out. And so, one thing that I do is bullet journaling. And that might look different for a lot of people. Some people might journal with just a pen and paper, but being able to like get those thoughts down is super relaxing. I think music is also something that is very accessible, like just relaxing to like music of your choice, engaging in something that doesn't require a lot of thought, whether that be like cooking your favorite recipe, or just really relaxing and spending time with yourself, with some self-care activities. So that's kind of what I would tend to do. What about you?
Yeah, it sound like pretty good
Mm-hmm.
ideas. I think for me personally, like honestly, I could do more self-care, but for like what I do, it's
Yeah.
typically exercise. Like I
So,
find going to the gym and like sports, doing stuff like that is
mm-hmm.
really like therapeutic, helps you like relieve stress, and also you get healthier, and that allows you to like deal with more problems. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so many different ways to just um, find what works best for you, but so important that we highlight that as a part of just the part of being a caregiver is also being a caregiver for yourself, because in the end that really does affect everyone. So and before moving on to the next clip, we do want to just ask you both to just what you would like more people to know about SGS in general.
I think, like on the doctor side of it, I think that just knowing that it's so unknown, and to really have an open perspective and to really research and look into things, and then also trust the caregivers that see the child every day, and when they're noticing things that are different, um, you know, that they trust and listen to people. We have some doctors that are really great about that, and when you go in and you say, hey, something's off here, they listen. And then others, they're like, oh, well, that can't happen, or oh, we've done this, and they just don't listen to you until it's a crisis. And then I just think for people around you and that know you, and people that are involved in your life, just yeah, just knowing that there's always something going on. And people, it's a natural thing, I think, for people just to ask how you're doing all the time. And I think that most people would just be really overwhelmed if they really knew how you were doing. And so yeah, and I think it's a lonely path being a caregiver of someone that's medically fragile and things that are really unknown, because there's not a lot of people out there that kind of just really understand that it's nonstop. You have so much love and compassion for somebody when you know their story, and it's kind of like you maybe can't walk in someone's shoes exactly, but you can, as you get to know people, then you do have more just of an understanding, a camaraderie. You build friendships with getting to know each other. But when you have someone you meet that does have somebody that they're caring for on an ongoing basis, you just have to know, like, their story might be a little bit more complex than what you were thinking.
There's strength through weakness. That there's when kids are special and they have rare disease, and it's like they were born that way and have that unique genetic makeup, and there's weakness, but there's strength through weakness. There's ways in which our daughter Hope and other special needs kids can brighten the room, or people can see them and see them smiling even in the midst of adversity or challenge, and think, wow, I can learn from that. Like, my life isn't as bad as I thought it was when I woke up this morning, because I just saw this child who's going through so much. And yet I sometimes think, and I'm healthy and and don't have a rare disease, but like sometimes I think my life is so bad. But there's these children who are out there with smiles on their faces, who are going through a lot of pain, and they just live with it. And they're going through, challenges with surgeries and challenges with all kinds of medical things, and yet they still are just have a unique ability to smile and love life.
Thanks, Melissa and Tim. Tim, you mentioned just seeing both the strengths and weaknesses of things, and you may be weak in something but strong in another, and to be able to recognize that um, you know a rare disease doesn't take the light away from you. You're still very bright in the room and still being very happy is so important. So thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I definitely like the like you can find strength in like people overcoming adversity. But for Melissa, I also really found your comment like for people in general to have more compassion. Like that was really struck with me. I thought, especially in today's world, like everyone is really, striving for the top. You want to be successful, like you said. But, we also often overlook like what other people could be going through because of that like drive for personal success. And like I think it is really important for everyone just to have a little bit more compassion to everyone else and consider, maybe they're not having their best day or like they're suffering from something that we don't know of, and just give them that kindness.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And we'll say the very strong point about you don't have to pretend to be strong. You can recognize that you're weak and recognize that, people that are weak do need help. And it's important to be able to recognize that so that you're able to help and support them. And, recognize both the strengths and the weaknesses, but being able to recognize weaknesses and finding support for that is so important. So, really important point that you made.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode. Thank you all so much for listening or watching, and we hope that you learned something. See you next time. Bye.